we're going to continue with their definitions as well as their categories. Okay, so prose. What do you mean by prose? Prose refers to any written work that follows a basic grammatical structure. So think of words and phrases arranged into sentences and paragraphs. So prose simply means language that follows the natural patterns found in everyday speech. So prose can be classified as fiction and non-fiction. So let's start with fiction. What is fiction? So basically, these are writings that use characters, setting, and plot to convey stories that are not real. Again, not real. So it comes from the Latin word fictus, which means to form, or from the Latin word fingere, which means to create. And there are different types of fiction. The first one we have novel. So novel is a long narrative divided into chapters. The events are taken from true-to-life stories and spans a period of time, or it spans a long period of time. So there are many characters involved. For example, Without Seeing the Dawn by Stephen Haveliana. And again, a novel has many subplots and it has many characters. In other words, it is complex. And number two, short story. Short story is a narrative involving one or more characters, one plot, and a single impression. And it can be read in one sitting alone. So for example, The Laughter of My Father by Carlos Punusa. And number three, plays. This is presented on a stage. So it is also called drama, and it is divided into acts, and each act has many scenes. Example, 13 Plays by Wilfredo M. Guerrero. So the people who are involved in a play are called theatrical performers. So they are going to act on stage, giving life to the script they have memorized. And number four, myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. Example, Tungkong Langit and Alonsina. And next, legends. These are fictitious narratives, usually about origins. Example, the Bicol legend by Pio Duran. We also have lots of legends here in Camotes Group of Islands. For example, in Pilar. So when I went to Pilar, I've known one legend there called Naokban Lagoon, or the legend of Naokban Lagoon in San Isidro, Pilar. And here in San Francisco, we have the legend of Lake Danao. I guess you are familiar with that. And number six, so you're also familiar with fables, right? So I believe you have read or you have performed on stage giving life to fables. So an example of fable is basically the monkey and the turtle. Okay, so I believe you have read a lot of fables, not only in the Philippines, and I think you're familiar with Aesop's fables. Of course, he is one of the most celebrated authors when it comes to fables. Now let's go to number seven, parables. So parables are short narratives that are at least part allegorical and that illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. In most cases, parables are biblical. Number eight, we have fairy tales. Fairy tales are stories featuring folkloric characters such as fairies, goblins, elves, trolls, giants, talking animals, and others. So folk tales are a subclass of folk tales. Again, fairy tales. These are subclasses of folk tales. So the stories often involved royalty, and modern versions usually have a happy ending. And now let's proceed to non-fiction. So when we speak about non-fiction, this is a branch of literature comprising works of narrative prose dealing with or offering opinions or conjectures upon facts and reality, including biography, history, and the essay. So let's proceed with essay. So essay expresses the viewpoint or opinion of the writer about a particular problem or event. So the best example of this is the editorial page of a newspaper. And it basically comes from the French essai, which means attempt. And the most common form of literature is essay. So number 2, biography. So biography deals with the life of a person, which may be about himself, his autobiography, or that of others. Example, Cayetano Arellano by Socorro O. Albert. And number 3, news. News is basically a report of everyday events in society, government, science, and industry, and accidents, as well as others that are of current, what is happening right now in the society, whether national or not. So that is what we call news. Number 4, oration. So oration is a formal treatment of a subject and is intended to be spoken in public. It appeals to the intellect, to the will, or to the emotions of the audience. So when you speak about oration, before the time of Shakespeare, oration is basically delivered in a bombastic and very formal way. So number 5, diary or journal. It is a book for writing discrete entries arranged by date, reporting on what has happened over the course of a day or periods. So that is diary or journal. I believe you have experience writing your own diary or your own journal. Okay, let's proceed. So that is what we call diary or journal. Right, you're going to write your own personal experiences about anything under the sun that has happened on a day or other periods. And next we have poetry. So aside from prose, we also have poetry, another division of literature. And poetry is a type of literature based on the interplay of words and rhythm. It often employs rhyme and meter, a set of rules governing the number and arrangement of syllable in each line. In poetry, words are strung together to form sounds, images, and ideas that might be too complex or abstract to describe directly. So we have 3 classifications of poetry. The first one, we have narrative and lyric, as well as dramatic poetry. So when it comes to narrative poetry, and narrative poetry has three categories. We have epic, metrical tale, and ballads. So what is an epic? An epic is an extended narrative about heroic exploits, often under supernatural control. It may deal with heroes and gods. So I think you have read an epic. So for example, Biag ni Lamang. Epic retells in a continuous narrative the life and works of a heroic or mythological person or group of persons. It is considered as the oldest form of literature since its existence is known to be along the ancient history. What is a metrical tale? So a metrical tale is a narrative which is written in verse and can be classified either as a ballad or a metrical romance. Examples of these are simply idyls or home tales, love tales, tales of the supernatural written for a strong moral purpose in a verse form. And next, what are ballads? So ballads are considered the shortest and simplest narrative poems with simple structure and tell a single incident. There are also variations of these like love ballads, war ballads, and sea ballads, humorous, moral, historical, or mythical ballads. In the early times, this referred to a song accompanying a dance. Next, lyric poetry. What is a lyric poetry? It refers to that kind of poetry meant to be sung to the accompaniment of a lyre. But now, this applies to any type of poetry that expresses emotions and feelings of the poet. They are usually short, simple, and easy to understand. And so the first category of lyric poetry is folk song or awiting bayan. So folk songs are short poems intended to be sung, and the most common theme is love, or the most common themes are love, despair, grief, doubt, joy, hope, and sorrow. And aside from folk song, we have sonnets. Sonnets are lyric poems of 14 lines dealing with an emotion and a feeling or an idea. So this focuses on a single theme. And number 3, elegy. So elegy is a lyric poem which expresses feelings of grief and melancholy and whose theme is about death. So I believe you have seen movies or anything about people or persons delivering a speech to someone who is already dead. Like for example, I believe when it was the time of former President Corazon Aquino, when Pres Aquino delivered her speech in front of thousands of people. It was live on television, and she was basically delivering eulogy for her mom. Number 4, ode. This is a poem of a noble feeling expressed with dignity, with no definite number of syllables or definite number of lines in a stanza. So it is a long, formal lyric poem with a serious theme. It often honors people, commemorates events, responds to natural scenes, or considers serious human problems. And number 4, song or awit. This has measures of 12 syllables or duosyllabic and slowly sung to the accompaniment of a guitar or bandurria. And a lyric poem is set to music and is intended to be sung. Number 5, corridos. Corridos basically have measures of 8 syllables or octosyllabic and recited to a martial beat. Dramatic poetry encompasses a highly emotional story that's written in verse and meant to be recited. It usually tells a story or refers to a specific situation. This would include closed drama or dramatic monologues and rhyme verse. And the first example of dramatic poetry is comedy. So the word comedy comes from the Greek term komos, meaning festivity or revelry. This form usually is light and written with the purpose of amusing and usually has a happy ending. So number 2, melodrama. So melodrama is usually used in musical plays with the opera. Today, this is related to tragedy just as the farce is to comedy. It arouses immediate and intense emotion and is usually sad, but there is a happy ending for the principal character. So number 3, tragedy. This involves the hero struggling mightily against dynamic forces. He meets death or ruin without success and satisfaction obtained by the protagonist in comedy. So protagonist is basically the main character of the story, and he's usually the good one, and the antagonist is the bad character in the story. Okay, so number 4, farce. Farce is an exaggerated comedy, and it seeks to arouse mirth by laughable lines. Situations are too ridiculous to be true. The characters seem to be caricatures, and the motives are undignified and absurd. So social poems is another type of poem, which is either purely comic or tragic, and it pictures the life of today. It may aim to bring about changes in the social condition. And the last one, we have haiku, and this basically originated in Japan. I think you're familiar with it. And this is a 700-year-old Japanese verse form and a 3-line poem consisting of 17 syllables. We have 5, 7, 5 syllables, 5 on the first, 7 on the second, and 5 on the final line. Crams a wealth of observation, feeling, and philosophy in just 17 syllables. It attempts to compress a great amount of meaning in the fewest possible words, and the poem suggests things which is up to the reader to understand, and most haiku deals with nature. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something from our lesson today. Thank you, and